When students progress to higher education, whether from school, college or work, a series of transitions, different expectations, situations and experiences impact on a student's behaviours and beliefs. Students' behaviours might include their ways of taking notes in lectures, their study habits like working late into the night, their revision strategies such as repeated reading rather than note-taking. These may have to change when students progress into higher education, because strategies that worked before may no longer work. For example, there may be many more essays to do with very tight turnaround times, or labs to attend very early in the morning when students are used to getting up later. Or very importantly, studying alone may be very hard to do when students have got used to working on projects in groups. Similarly, students' beliefs about themselves and their abilities may also change when they progress to higher education. Students, for example, may find out that they actually don't enjoy the subject that they signed up to study, and may have to find ways of making it more conceptually interesting for themselves, or to think about their longer-term goals rather than short-term enjoyment. Students may also find that things that they found easy at school or in work, they no longer find straightforward, and the shock of not understanding a subject or a concept can be stressful and create anxiety. But there may be other factors that make transitions difficult for students, and they relate to students' backgrounds and life experiences. For example, it may be the case that some students are used to very individual and even isolated educational experiences, and the expectations of social learning seem contrary to how they prefer to learn. Similarly, for students coming from backgrounds where they have held or still hold positions of great responsibility, such as being a parent or a carer or a leader in the workplace, the higher education environment can seem literally patronising or disempowering. Of course, all this implies that moving to higher education is only ever stressful and dislocating, but this is far from the truth. All of the ideas that I've raised so far can also be positives, but that in itself can lead to problems of transitions too. For example, students may find that they love social learning so much that they spend all their time in social situations and do very little individual thinking. Students may find that group work is so satisfying that they lose sight of their own development and mistake someone else's great idea for their own. And finally, students can sometimes feel so busy that they mistake time spent on a task for the quality of the actual outcomes. Some then, research in this area has repeatedly shown that when they transition to university, learners develop an identity that is based on their experiences whilst at university, their previous educational experiences, and their personal cultural autobiographies. But what does this mean for learners in transition then? Well, what becomes of learners when they get into higher education depends very much on how universities treat students, what they expect of them, how they communicate with them, and how they work with them to provide meaningful, useful, and successful educational experiences. As you can imagine, this is something of a tall order, but it's a critical one, because for all students making the transition to higher education, being there is a personal, cultural and financial investment of vast proportions. In fact, it's one of the most important outlays that many people will ever make. So universities must try very hard to get it right. So what can universities do about transition? Of course, most universities have successful programs that are geared up to help students orientate themselves and to make expectations about studying very clear. Examples of this are writing boot camps designed to ensure that students can make their views understood in essay form. Another one is Oracy Matters, a program designed to help students develop skills of oral argumentation. Yet another is Prose Perfect, a program that focuses on creative and elegant writing and helping students to use vocabulary as an expressive and persuasive tool. Of course, these are all great ideas and worth adopting at programme and department level. But how can we go about making successful transitions at an individual lecturer level? For the answer to this, we must step back a little and ask two related questions. First, what is an effective transition solution that is central to the experience of a particular student group? And second, what is excellent transition practice for all students, regardless of who they are, where they come from, what they think, and how they feel? Research demonstrates repeatedly that these two questions do overlap, and although there are, as you might expect, some very specific things that lecturers can do for some particular students, there are some key ideas that we can keep in mind about transition for all students. So for lecturers, these key ideas are: number 1, engineering, number 2, engaging, and 3, empowering. Okay, let's take a closer look at each in turn. 1. Engineering. Engineering a good transition necessitates carefully and artfully designing teaching, assessment and curriculum that leads purposefully to the particular outcomes that you want for a module or programme, rather than the haphazard ones that we often develop or inherit that seem to have their own inner logic which is often not apparent to students. So you might, for example, better coordinate expectations with other modules, or you might change assessments to develop very particular abilities. 2. Engaging. Effective transitions mean that lecturers must actively engage with students in ways that recognise the messiness and complexity of learning and teaching. And this doesn't have to be lecturer initiated. For example, you might develop module peer support networks across years and to host shared problem-solving workshops on particularly tricky areas. You might host academic advising sessions on specific topics, such as educating about assessment feedback, which ultimately save time, because you'll not only be assisting in the development of vicarious learning, but you also won't have to repeat yourself. 3. Empowering. Finally, empowering. For lecturers, this means a mixture of educating students through giving them such clear information to start with so that you can then focus on thinking and big ideas, and also making it clear to students that when they make progress, you are acknowledging that and validating their conceptual and learning development. A simple example of how this can be done is through the use of particular classes in modules to use as stopping for a breath sessions, where you give students a chance to discuss muddy ideas and clarify areas that are proving difficult.